Hello, and welcome to another episode of the School Safety Free Period. I'm Amanda Klinger,
And I'm Dr. Amy Klinger.
and we're with the Educators School Safety Network. We are a national nonprofit organization, and we provide school safety training and technical assistance and consulting and help and everything. We do everything when it comes to school safety in a K-12 capacity. But typically, we're a little bit more serious and we're a little bit more academic, but we have our School Safety Free Period podcast and live stream where we really cut loose and talk about school safety even more. Does that sound right?
Sure. And for our viewers, today we're really casual. We've got t-shirts. My office is a mess. I'm redoing things.
Yeah.
So be glad if you're listening on the podcast because you won't be distracted by what is going on back there. So, but it's really actually quite a good segue into what I want to talk about today because we've got two things happening simultaneously. So we have a change of seasons, right? The weather is changing, and we have this behind me changing the way, the dynamic, the environment, the way that we are doing our work, the circumstances and the environment in which we're doing our work. And that really has come to kind of the forefront for me. If we look at school culture is the way we do things around here, and school climate is what's the weather like in the school. We've seen that a lot in some of the recent opportunities we've had to be out in the field working in schools. And I've really seen some things that I think are very interesting and really insightful and positive. But then I've also seen a number of things that I think are very unintended. I think there's some unintended messaging going on in the way that we set up our classrooms and the way that students experience what's happening in our room as teachers. And this is not just an elementary discussion, although some of it is going to center around that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's just some interesting things that we should look at, not necessarily pros or cons, like that one is inherently bad and one is inherently good, but just to kind of think about what's the takeaway of why are we doing this thing, and is that what we really were trying to do when we did this thing. So I'll start with a couple of the ones that I've really been noticing lately. One of them is the room setup in terms of trying to create this shelter, if you will, away from the kids. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily what we intend, but we see a lot of rooms where the teacher's desk and the way and the furniture surrounding it and the bookcases and all the other stuff around the teacher's desk creates sort of like this barrier, this fort, like I'm going to retreat behind the bookcases into my domain as the teacher while you guys are on the other side of the wall or on the other side. And I was just in a school where it was deliberately set up that way with filing cabinets and bookcases and all kinds of stuff. And I understand that the teacher, needs space to work, et cetera, et cetera. But there is that unintended, unwelcome sort of, you guys go over there and stay on that side, and I'm over here on this side working. And there are some implications. Well, there's evacuation implications of how quickly can I get around all that stuff to get to initiate an evacuation. But then there's also kind of the culture or the message of like, we have this separation, and then you add to it what we see so often with personal kitchens of a microwave and a refrigerator and a coffee maker, and there's just like this little refuge back there in this one corner of the room where like we're gonna the adult is gonna retreat to get away from the kids.
And the question then is like, so what? Like, so no one intended to have a separation between themselves and the students, but there's a cost, there's an impact on student experience. Yeah.
So then there's the other extreme is where we've made it look like a lounge, right? There's lights and mood lighting and Christmas tree lights and scarves, on all of the windows or the lights. And we've got couches and chairs and bar stools and, all kinds of residential type furniture that we've created sort of this home away from home. And again, we can, like you alluded to, we can look at what's the intended consequence or the intention and then the unintended consequence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, from a safety perspective, you can identify what the problems are, correct?
Me personally, or like
Yeah,
our
you.
listener? Well,
No, you.
well, I mean, if you have non-commercial furniture, that's a concern because it's not really rated for commercial use in terms of fire retardancy, or in terms of like lice, because
Yeah.
there's that concern. There's the concern about the, having fabric on lights. Potentially could be a fire hazard, hopefully not. All of the lamps, we sort of are, you're in a lot of schools where the schools are pretty old, and therefore the electrical systems are not necessarily designed for 40 different lamps or different sets of LED lights.
And what is our current? Do you know what our current record is for number of lamps in a classroom?
I do not know.
11.
11.
11 different lamps. I mean, floor lamps, table lamps, mood lamps, not counting also the Christmas tree lights or the LED strings of lights, all in one room while the overhead lights are turned off.
Well, and I think it sort of begs the question, and as the person here who's not, an educator by training, is there data to support that sort of multi-layered lighting as a best educational practice? Now, I do know in terms of interior design that there's recommendations that you have layers of lighting and that you can have lamps and you can have overhead lights and that you can use those things in conjunction and in tandem. But I personally am not super familiar with the literature on that in terms of, is that proven to be a best practice educationally, or is that a preference of folks?
No,
and so I think that's something to be examined in terms of, do we really know that this is sort of the best
That
approach?
is a good question. And I think you can take that question and stretch it out to cover more than just lamps. But is it about the lamps, or is it about the learning? Is it about the lamps, or is it about the environment? Is it about the lamps, or is it about the student experience? And when you have 11 lamps, I'm beginning to feel like it's about the lamps. It's not about, so there is a point where some of it becomes counterproductive, where maybe the soft glow in the reading nook now becomes the floor lamp in the whatever space, and then the other lamp, and then the other lamp, and so it really, it very quickly can tip over into, we're creating more problems than we've solved, because we now have trip hazards. We now have things that can fall over. We now have, I forgot and went home and left all the lights on, or left this lamp on, or left my, coffee maker on, or all of these different things. And so, and then we get into this whole idea of, what is this for? I mean, what kind of an environment are we trying to create? Are we trying to make it look like a bistro, or are we trying to make it look like a learning laboratory? Are we trying to make it look like, a cozy lounge, or are we trying to make it look like a supportive reading nook where we're reading together and enjoying literature? I mean, so I don't have really good hard and fast answers, but I think there is, my criticism or my concern is when it becomes about the lamps, not about what we're trying to accomplish with the lamps.
Well, I would say, to build off of what you said in terms of the lighting, when we're in schools, one thing that really concerns me is areas that are either not well lit or that the lights are off, which sounds so wild to say, but when we are in schools, especially at the secondary level, where there's areas of the school that are not used throughout the school day, and they're just dark, just there's no lights. You go down, the hallway between the auxiliary gym and the wrestling room, and it's pitch black down there. And
yeah, sometimes you get a real horror movie vibe out of this empty classroom. I mean, there's a reason why you can find some pretty spooky looking pictures of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it sort of begs the question of, when we do these assessments, we don't have a key. So we're not in a off-limits area. We are in a public area that any student or any visitor could wander into intentionally or unintentionally. And it's sort of the question of, what is the message that we're sending about this place? We have dark, empty corridors that no one ever goes in unless they're filming a horror movie, or this is our place and we take pride in it, and people are here and it's bright and it's occupied. And I understand that, sometimes that is a concern for energy conservation, and that we have motion activated lights. But I think that's something that certainly to be sort of examined of what is the unintended consequence of having this hallway that's completely empty and completely pitch black. And the sort of example that I always will give to folks is to sort of channel your most emo, inner middle schooler, right? And here I am in this hallway and it's dark and no one is missing me. I've been out of class for 15 minutes and no one knows where I am and I'm alone in the dark, cruel world. I mean, there's a cost that we have these spaces in our schools that are accessible, whether that's on purpose or not, that are accessible to people and that are just not the welcoming, inviting, bright, environment that we cultivate in so many other aspects of our schools.
And I think in some ways, relationships determine the culture of a school, and some of the physical manifestations really determine the climate, the weather of the school. The one that really I've become very interested in lately is this sort of notion that more is more. So if we have, 50 different baskets of books, 55 baskets of books is better. And if we have science kits, we need 20 science kits. And you see this almost completely overwhelmingly stimulating environment that, and we say this a lot in our training, if you teach young kids, you need to go sit on the floor in your room and look up and look at how it looks like the amount of stuff that is stored all the way to the ceiling. And it just, the clutter and the distraction and it is very, in some kids, and I would say maybe in a lot of kids, it is very overstimulating and almost to the point of sort of anxiety inducing, or at least, making it difficult to concentrate because there's all this stuff. And of course, when you talk to people about it, it's, well, we want an enriching environment. Yes, but oftentimes the stuff we see that is the overwhelming clutter is not things designed to enrich kids. It's designed to, I need to store this and I don't have anywhere else to put it. Or I don't want to go down to the book room, or I don't want to put it in the basement. I want it right here at my hand, even though Valentine's Day isn't until February. I need to have this giant box with all the Valentine stuff in it, teetering on the top of a cabinet, scraping the ceiling while it, overflows into the stuff around it. And so we really, we did a podcast a couple of weeks ago about being nose blind. It's kind of that, where you don't even see it anymore, but the kids do. I think they really feel that sense of like so much stuff. And as I've been doing a lot of decluttering, and you start looking at how much more calming and how much more visually appealing an area is when it is not stuffed to the rafters. And I think that's, in older buildings especially, I think that's a real problem.
Yeah, I think what you said about being, nose blind, that you become, numb to your own environment. When we do these assessments, I'm like a little bit claustrophobic, and so I can really like feel it when you go into a room where every single surface is covered with something that was, designed to be decorative or stimulating, and then above that is 4 or 8 feet of shelves with just so much stuff. And you go into those rooms, and I know I personally am just like, I gotta get out of this one, because it's just like, this is too much, like that it has that real visceral reaction. And if we, have a lot of students that are struggling with attention or are struggling with focus as a result of sort of what's happening in our culture with instant gratification and social media and technology use, that, we have, that people are kind of struggling with their attention being divided or their focus anyway, and then we have so much happening in these rooms. It sort of wonders if we've set ourselves up for success or not.
Yeah. In a couple of the schools we visited recently, I thought it was and I know that not everyone has the option to do this, so please, I'm not saying it needs to happen, but I found it very interesting that some schools have chosen to have a separate space for teachers' desks and work areas and that kind of things, all the filing stuff, and they have opted to have the classroom be much more about the student experience from a student perspective, rather than commingling the work area and my coffee maker, and boy, I bet you're thirsty. Look in my refrigerator, I have my Diet Coke, and creating that sort of partition or chasm between the adults and the kids, and instead having an adult space where people work and a kid space that is our learning laboratory where we're doing the academic work. And so I think that's kind of an interesting one as well. But my final one that I don't have clearly articulated per se, but that is starting to really, I'm really starting to see it, is the amount of times that the things we do in our classroom reinforce the things we're complaining about. So we complain that kids are messy and disorganized, and then the classroom is messy and disorganized. Everyone is messy and disorganized. We complain that our kids don't pay attention, and then we create an environment that makes it difficult to pay attention because there's so much happening. When you go into sort of a minimalist, if you will, kind of environment, we were in one not too long ago in a first grade classroom, and the difference is really shocking in terms of how you feel in the space and how much calmer it seems and how much more focused kids can be. But now I'm also starting to look at, we complain that kids have difficulty with interpersonal interactions, right? They have difficulty carrying on a conversation. They always have their face in a screen. And then I walk into a classroom where the teacher has built a wall so that the kids can't talk to her. And we have put systems in place where the kids type in, I want to go to the bathroom, and they get a virtual hall pass instead of talking to the teacher. Or where the one that really strikes me, I saw just a week or so ago, was a pre-kindergarten class with a giant television, a huge TV, smart board. And they weren't using it. It was just running with pumpkins on it. And so why do we have a screen? Why do we have a 70-inch screen that's projecting to nobody, but it's in the face of these kindergartners or these pre-kindergartners who are supposed to be working in centers? And so I think we kind of inadvertently continue to reinforce the behaviors that we complain about. And all of them have an impact on climate and culture. And some of them have other impact on school safety. And we talked about that in terms of, evacuation hazards and fire and all these other ones. So I think it's a really interesting topic that we need to maybe get on our radar a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
and it's not just an elementary, even though we've used a lot of elementary examples. Sure. I think sometimes the secondary equivalent is the other end, where it looks like the visitor waiting room in a prison, that there's like nothing. There's nothing, everything is bolted down. There's no decorations. It's very, so there's got to be a middle ground, that is developmentally appropriate, that makes a welcoming, interactive space without it either looking utilitarian, like nobody actually even lives there, or looking like I'm in a bistro, So yeah. I think that's an interesting way to reflect. And I would love to hear, what people's reactions are that as you walk around your own school and kind of take a look at some of the classrooms that you pass by.
Well, as you mentioned that, if you have thoughts or your comments on it, you can always comment here on the video, or you can shoot us an email, info@eschoolsafety.org. That's the website, www.eschoolsafety.org. We have tons of free resources. We got all kinds of information and other supports as you're going about this work. And if you have any other questions, you can always reach out there. And then I guess until next time, thanks so much.
Bye.